So this is the one piece sleeve block, okay, page 1771. So this sleeve block is going to fit your bodice block, which was a close fitting bodice block here that we already did, you know, our first block. So just a couple of things on sleeves. I mentioned it already, but one particular block, for example, this bodice block can have several sleeve blocks that go with it. The thing about this sleeve block is it's built on top of the bodice block. So when you look at this diagram, you can see the dotted line of the body block here. Okay, the bodice block. And you can see that it's copied right down to this line here, which is on this diagram it says elbow line. So notice the elbow is basically what is on this block, the waist. And if you think about it on your body, you might not have thought about it before, but where your waist is where your elbow is. Okay, so that's how you get it on this block, on the Winifred Aldrich Sleeve Block. So what you have to do is put your paper, this paper, on top of this block and trace it. Now, she has traced all of that. That's a waste of time. I wouldn't trace all of that. I'll show you what you need to trace. You need to trace this line here, this line, and this line here, this perpendicular line. So you only actually really need those three, and I wouldn't bother trace all the rest of it because it's going to be time consuming. I mean, sometimes you could actually construct this sleeve block right on top of here, and then you'd have two on top of each other. But when you're learning, that's just going to be too many lines and too confusing. All right. I have my piece of paper and I'm going to put it on top here. And again, just be careful how you place it. Just look at the diagram and see that position 1 is here, is position 22 on your body block. So you can see that more of the diagram is to the left-hand side and less is to the right. Okay, so the start is the same. Measurements from any size chart can be used on this. Personal measurements can be used on this. So again, this is a formula essentially for creating a block, and you can put different size measurements in and your own personal size. Notice what's unusual about this is there's only 2 measurements, and that's unusual. Usually there's a longer list, so there's only very few starting measurements we need, and one is kind of general. She just says the arm size. So remember, the arm size is the armhole. Another word for that is the armhole. So your arm side, and she just says measure the arm side. So there's no measurement given. She usually has a standard measurement. And then she has the sleeve length, 58.5. But there's a note straight away under that saying, for coats and easy fitting jackets, add 1.5 to the sleeve length. So straight away, you need to add length if you're on coats or jackets. So we can ignore that because we're not on coats and jackets. But again, to remind you that you need to read every single word of Winifred's so that you know exactly what you're doing. So measuring the arm side, that's the first thing to do, and I'll show you how to do it. But what I would say is that you need to take this measurement a few times. So the arm side here is here. Now, what you need to do to measure that is use a measuring tape. So you need to use something that bends around. Sometimes you have bendy rulers. I don't really trust the measurements on the bendy rulers that much. They might work out, but I use measuring tape. So the measuring tape goes perpendicular to your page. So your page is there, your measuring tape sticks up from it like that. And you place it along, and you kind of just inch along a little bit at a time like that. And you go right the way around the curve. Okay. Until you get up to the top and you find what that measurement is. Okay, so everybody's is going to be a little different. That's why every sleeve block in the room is different. So that's why you can't come up to mine and trace it, or my card block. Okay, so I do correct the bodice blocks. But everybody draws their curve slightly differently. So if you've deepened out here a little bit more than me, your measurement's going to be a little longer than mine. If you have made it a little bit less deep, your curves, the measurement will be a little bit shorter. So it's not a problem. There's a range there that you can do it within. That's fine. It's just that your measurement will be different. So you are making the sleeve for your block, so you need to go with your measurement. Now, it shouldn't be hugely different. So what I say is it should be, you know, within kind of, certainly within a centimetre, more like within 0.5, 0.6 millimetres either way. So I just did this one. This was the one I did on the board with pen and quite quickly, so I got 42.2. The one that I've done on pencil, like properly, on my one, my bodice block arm size is 42.6. So the difference of 4 millimetres even on my own ones, you know. So there will be a difference, but it will be only very slight. So what you want to do is write it straight away on the top of your block, because all your calculations will come from your one. So each, do you know what I mean? So Blessing's calculation is going to be different to Caitlin's, going to be different to Angela's. So what I'm going to do is do 42.6 because that's what's on the handout. And it does say a note, yours should be within 1 centimetre of that measurement. 1 meaning like mainly kind of 0.5 up or 0.5 down. My curves tend to be deep, so my measurement tends to be a little bigger. So when you're doing your arm side, just remember, take it 3 times at least. If you're getting 3 different measurements, take it 4 times, take it 5 times, keep taking it until you're starting to get a measurement that's consistent, because you're learning the skill of measuring. So the first time or the second time you measure, most likely your hand will have slipped or something will be a little off. So you definitely need to practice that, do it a few times. We've done that, we've got that. That's on the top. Now I'm going to put my paper down, making sure I have enough space here, enough space there, and enough there to be reasonable. And I'm going to trace through. So you are using spot and cross paper or dot and cross. It seems to be referred to as either. Your dots and crosses need to be on your grain line, otherwise you will lose marks. Okay, so how you use the paper shows me if you know what that paper is about. We have plain paper, you don't have to line anything up, and we have spot and cross paper. You have to line up your grain with one of the spots and cross lines. Alright, so at the moment I have my dots and crosses and they're going like this at an angle and they're not lined up with this line here. I need to have them lined up. Not only maybe with this line, but with this. This is our starting point. So I'm going to get my starting point, which is 0.22 on my block, and I'm going to be sure that there's a cross there, and that I go up along spots and crosses here and here. I'm going to place my spots and crosses carefully. I've got it roughly in the right area. Now I'm going to choose a spot, a cross. I think I like a cross better. I'm going to place it there. I'm going to see my dots are going up along that line, and my dots and crosses are going along this line now. So now I have my paper lined up correctly. So now I can draw in this line. I can do it fairly easy because I'm just going through my spots and crosses, which makes my life easier. And then I'm coming up on this line here on a spot and cross. Okay, so this is your waistline on your bodice block, so it's your elbow line on your sleeve block. You can draw it in like that. So they're the main things you need to draw in, and then I just draw them in solid. You can dot them if you want. I often just forget to dot the lines. So now there's one last thing. We're going to be taking this measurement all the time from this arm side. So I'm going to actually draw that in kind of lightly. I will dot that, I think, or I'll just use a smaller pen. So I'm going to Okay, so you see I can see that.
So that's what you have on this sheet.
So that's what you have on this sheet. So you see when I lift it up, that's what you need as your starting point. Yeah, and then we're going to start doing all of this stuff. You see, you can take that off. And here, because sometimes the information coming through from this is really busy and confusing, so it can be nicer to then have it as a clear space like that. So, let's go through her instructions. Draw a perpendicular line from the arm side line at 1, touching the front arm side. So that instruction is a little bit hard to understand. That's what I've done there. Okay, so she's got position 1, that lines up with 22, and that's what she means by that. You know? The next thing she says is 1 to 2. So this is a most important measurement because everything is out on your block if this is out. So 1 to 2 is up here. Again, we do our thing of looking at the bold, writing 1 to 2, finding it on our diagram so we know visually where we're going and we can have an estimate of, you know, the measurement, like it's not 50 centimeters, you know what I mean? So then we look at what she gives us in terms of our equation for how to find that measurement for our particular size and our particular bodice block we're doing, which is a close fitting women's wear close fitting bodice block size 12. All right. So 1/3 of your arm side measurement. Okay, then there's a bunch of stuff in brackets. Size 8 to 14 minus 0.5. Are we size 8 to 14?
Yes.
Yes, so we minus 0.5. Okay, so we follow that instruction. And a different amount for size 16 to 20. And then square across. So there's 3 sets of instructions there. 1/3 of the arm side, minus 0.5, and then we square across once we get to that point. And so I'm going to take my 42.6, so this is what makes it quicker is here. I can look and I have divided 42.6 by 3 and I've minus 0.5 and the amount that I get is 13.7. So yours should be close to that. If you think about it, if you're 3 millimeters off of my original and then you divide that by 3, you should be only 1 millimeter off at this point. So that's why you'll start to see, it doesn't matter if you're 0.5 or 0.6 millimeters out, you'll end up only like 1 millimeter out here. So our sleeve blocks will still be very, very close, you know, but they just won't be identical. So 13.7 up is what I measure, and then I square over. Again, I would recommend measuring and then concentrate on your measuring, then concentrate on your squaring, so that you're getting each technique very accurate, because this is a block. The blocks have to be so precise, more precise than any other part of pattern drafting. So we take our time with it. So that's position 1, that's 2, okay? So the positions are circled. Okay, so then the next one, the next instruction is midway. It says 3, so we look at point 3, and the instruction is midway between 1 and 2. So it's midway there, and we're squaring across. And it says through the arm side here, so we're going to find this midway, we're going to square across, and where it hits this arm side, on the other side is position 4. That's what she means on that instruction. She calls that, she says, mark the balance point and continue the line. So that is what we call a balance point. She's calling that. So there is balance point on the sleeve. And what that is it's somewhere there, and it is different to position 16. That's what's confusing. It's very close to position 16 that we did on our bodice construction, but it's not. It's not that point. It's somewhere slightly different. So from my diagram where I've worked out all of the measurements in advance, you can see that my measurement is 6 6.9. So from 2 to 3 is 6.9. So I'm going to come down 6.9.
And square across.
And I'm going to square across. Lovely. Yeah. So I concentrated on my measuring first at once, and then I concentrate on my squaring, because both are skills we still might be working on. So that's position 3. That's position 4. That was 6.9. I don't want to write all that in because I'm going to end up drawing there, and I don't want there to be too much mess. Okay. Next is 1 to 5. So we find that on our diagram. So 1 to 5. So we're still in this position on this line, and this is going to be our front balance point. So again, we're going to have this position here. It's going to be close to 31, but it's not going to be 31. So 31 and 16 on our bodice block. What I usually do at this point is I put a nice big X through those. So they are not helpful, they're not useful, they're helpful up just to get this arm side when we're doing our bodice. After that, they confuse people and we think they're important for the sleeve, but they're not. So we're going to end up getting a position very close to that, and that will be our front balance point. So half the measurement 1 to 3, so up to 5 is half the measurement 1 to 3, which we had as 6.9. And then we mark our front balance point as shown, so she shows you that, but notice there's 2 dots, one right next to each other. So she says mark adjacent arm side point 5A with balance point. So all she's saying is we come up the amount, which is half, which is 3.5. Essentially when we round up. Now that is there on this line, and just a couple of millimeters over is my arm side line. So it is important that we can differentiate between them. There's only 2 or 3 millimeters. Depending on how you drew your curve, there might be no millimeters difference between them, because if your curve was flat at that point. So that's what she means. So once I get that, I'm going to square across, and essentially this position where this intersects with this line is 5, and the other one along the arm side curve is 5A. So that is also something that confuses people a lot. Okay? Because sometimes we're going to be measuring from 5, and sometimes we're going to be measuring from 5A. They're very close together, so this is where we have to be very carefully paying attention to our instructions. Really, when you're creating a block, the main skill you're using is, concentration, focus, and following instructions, actually, really carefully following instructions. So 6, the next instruction 6, very simple, front shoulder point. So all we're doing is we're labeling this point here 6. Okay, we can move on. The next one is a big one, 5 to 7. So 5 to 7. Okay, so we can see it's there, 5, we have 5, and we're going to 7, which is somewhere up here. It's on this line too, somewhere up near this. So we're going to be drawing a line here somewhere, okay? So we got our visual in advance. Then we're going to read, how do we get that measurement? How do we get that line? The way we do it is we measure the curve of 5A to 6. And then it says plus 1 centimeter. There's a whole bunch of information in brackets. We need to read it, this amount for 16 to 20 sizes, and then plus 1.5 for all these other sizes. So, okay, we know those brackets aren't relevant to us. We're working on a size 12. Then, though, there's still another set of instructions. It says join with a line, and it says mark top sleeve balance point 7. So that when we join this with the line, and whatever that hits that point, it's what they call the balance point at the top of the sleeve, and it's marked with the number 7. So I'm going to there's 2 points here. She says to add 1 centimeter into this. If you add 1 centimeter into this, you're adding more into the sleeve head, okay? You do need ease in there. You need more, a bigger measurement on your sleeve than on your armhole. You're going to sew. It'll be one of the sewing skills that you learn. How to ease in a sleeve. So this here, this measurement here, is bigger than this by design. If you sew something that's bigger to something that's smaller, it creates a curved shape. So it creates extra here. So first of all, it curves, but also it gives extra for the bulk of the arm. Because if you were to sew something just there and it went straight down, there'd be no space for the flesh, you know? Okay, and also the sleeve wants to curve to take a corner there to go downward. So
Sorry,
that's...
Marina, are we on 7 to 9 now?
Yeah. Oh no, we're on 5 to 7.
Oh, right.
So this is the bit that I have to explain because she says put in 1 centimetre. I'm going to tell you that's not very useful. I would put in 0.5 because if you put in 1, you can sew only really with wool fabric because hardly any other fabrics ease in that much. So the amount that you put in this position on the block, and she should really have a note here. She does have it at the end, you see here at the end? She has it, okay? And so sometimes it's annoying if you're beginning, you'd be like, you do the whole thing, you get to the end, and then she says the ease the sleeve head is drafted to give a full rounded appearance to the sleeve head. So she's full rounded appearance. For a flatter insertion, reduce the ease allowance in the draft. See notes 5 to 7, so that's where we're at, 5 to 7. So she does mention it, okay? But again, this is designed at sort of intermediate level, like you'd know already, you'd be looking for that note, whereas if you're beginning, you're like, by the time you get to that, you're like, what is she?
So we use 0.5.
So I would recommend 0.5. You know, if people aren't here for this demonstration, they come in and they add a centimetre. I'm not going to mark it down. It's still a sleeve block. There isn't anything particularly wrong with it. I just think it's a better sleeve block because this is a bodice block, and what we make from the bodice block is typically blouses and dresses. And typically the fabric used for blouses and dresses don't have as much ease in them. You can see here the calico doesn't have ease. That's why it looks wobbly, it doesn't look great. And that's with the reduced ease. You know, you'd want to, so when you toile it and you go, oh, that doesn't look great, you take a little bit more ease out so it looks better. You know, so you have to, that's the purpose of toiling with the fabric that you're going to use or something very close. And one thing you might have to do is reduce the ease on the sleeve because it just will not actually ease in. Different fabrics ease in better than others. Then, if you're using a jacket, if you're using a wool to create something like a jacket, and then you see, wow, how much wool will ease, which is amazing. So it's like something that will sculpt. Go into 3-dimensional shapes, it will shrink, it will expand, it will ease, it will do loads of stuff. So you see why tailored things are nearly always made in wool because they really sculpt beautifully. Okay, so that's the lesson with that. So what we're going to do is the measurement of the curve 5A to 6. So I have to go and measure from 5A, which is that point on the curve, to 6. And then I have to remember, first of all, I have to remember I'm adding something. Next of all, I have to remember I'm adding only 0.5, not 1 like her instruction. So I'm getting the 14.2 on this one. So you can see my instruction I have that I got 14 and I'm adding 0.5. So I end up with 14.5 as the length of my line. So these two bits, 5 to 7 and 7 to 9, are the most complex part of this draft. Okay, so go slowly, double check your work. If you're not used to doing these measurements, measure it a few times, especially if you notice. The key here, when I say my measurement is 14, yours should be somewhat close, but it might not be 14. It might be 13.8, it might be 14.2. It could be slightly different. But the 14 should guide you. Like you shouldn't be at 16, you shouldn't even be at 15. You need to be somewhere close to 14.
In between.
Yeah, within a couple of millimeters of that is fine. And then you come to me if there's an issue, if you're like, this is 15, there's something wrong. Okay, so minus 14, and then I'm adding 0.5, so 14.5. Now we're doing that skill, that technique that we've done a few times. We find 14.5 on our measuring implement or ruler, a set square. We're going to take that measurement and we're going to apply it not from 5A but from 5, from the intersection on the line. The curve is only guiding us for our measurements. These are our construction lines. So we're going from construction point 5 and we're going to place 14.5 on there, and then we're going to swivel this until it hits this point here. Again, yours might look a little different than her diagram in the book. So where she has 0.7 in terms of in relation to how close it is to our arm side, yours might be a little bit closer, a little bit further away. So don't worry if yours isn't exactly like the diagram, because remember this diagram is for all types of blocks and all types of blocks and all types of sizes. Okay, so 14.5, I'm going to put 0 actually there and then pivot it until 14.5 hits. Okay, and then I'm going to mark that, and that is position 7. That's the sleeve head. I usually call that the shoulder notch, where it hits the shoulder on the bodice. She is calling it the top sleeve balance point. Okay, so I am going to draw my line then. So I've got my point and now I'm going to draw my line from position 5 to 7. Okay, that was the hard bit. We're going to do a very similar thing now again. Our next instruction is 8 is the back shoulder point, so that's really easy. We're just literally labeling that 8 so we can now talk about it. It's our construction point, and we're moving on to 7 to 9, which is from here, 7 down to 9. So we're coming from 7 and we can see we're coming down onto this line. I can tell my line isn't long enough, so I need to extend it. So I'm going to come down here. So that's where we're going. You can see it's, you know, what it looks like visually. That helps us. We're not on the curves yet, they come later, so we're just looking at the straight lines. Now, what she's going to say is going to be very similar to our last thing that we did from 5 to 7. We're going to measure the measurement of the curve 4 to 8 plus 1. So 4 is here and 8 is there. We're going to measure that, and she says to add 1, but in our case we're going to add 0.5 instead. So I shall measure that again with my measuring tape in the perpendicular position, find what my measurement is, check it against my diagram here. Mine was 11.3, so yours should be somewhere like that. Maybe it's 11.2, maybe it's 11.5, somewhere like that. And we're going to add 0.5, so I end up with 11.8, so you should have something very similar to that. We're going to take that measurement, 11.8, and we're going to put it between these 2 points. We're going to swing it down from 7 to this line, so I need to extend that line out. Okay, and so that is position 9. And I'm going to draw my line in there. You added 0.5. Yes. So that's what all this is written on this. When you see it, you kind of go, why are all those things written? You can see 11.3 plus 0.5 equals 11.8. So that's why I wrote it all out. And so now the next thing is 10, position 10, we can see it there, and she just says 10, the underarm point on the side seam, mark with the balance point. So I actually already did that, because when I was tracing this, position 32 is essentially position 10. I know I need that, so I marked it in already. If for some reason you hadn't done that, you need to take your paper back up and place it back on here and find that and mark it in. So that just gives us a position that we can talk about. And then 5 to 11 is our next instruction, so we can look. So that's 5 and 11 is down here, so we're going to come here. It's down on this line here, our arm side line. It's smaller, it's much smaller than this, so we have an idea of what we're looking for. And it says the measurement of the curve 5A to 10 less 0.3 centimeters and join with a line. So 5A to 10, we're going to be measuring that. This time we're minusing because it's going, the curve's going the opposite way, so we're taking a little bit out. So it's less than, and so we measure minus 0.3 and apply that measurement between 5 and the arm side line. So I look at what I got. My measurement was 6.9. I minus 0.3 and I got 6.6. Taking my 6.6, going from position 5, not 5A, just be careful to be putting this line from position 5. Here, what was my 6.6? Okay, and that is position 11. I marked it in, and now I am drawing my line. And I'd recommend that. I think concentrate on getting it marked before you start drawing the line. Sometimes people hold it and then try and draw the line, but I think it's better, particularly on the blocks, to just concentrate on one thing at a time. So next we are at 9 to 12, so we can see it there, 9 to 12, we're going to be coming out this way. Okay, we'll nearly have our sleeve head done, or the lines for it. We curve it afterwards, so so 9 to 12 is the measurement of curve 4 to 10 less 0.3 centimeters. So very similar to our last instruction. We're just doing this curve because this is going to sew to that. It's like this. This part is going to sew to that. So that's important to understand why we're relating them to each other. So 4 to 10, we measure that with the measuring tape, the perpendicular position. Do it a few times if you're struggling to get the measurement. Once you get your measurement, check on with mine. Mine is 9.8, so yours should be somewhat similar. You minus 0.3 and you get 9.5, and yours should be somewhat similar. Then we take our 9.5 measurement, we're going to place it between, from position 9, and we're going to pivot this until it hits this line, our arm side line. My line is just long enough. If it wasn't, I'd need to extend it, but it just happens to be long enough. Okay? So that's my position 12. And then I mark it, then I draw my line so I can concentrate on getting that line exactly in the right position. So now I have my base, and this will be the base that I construct my curve on. So these are all construction lines. You won't be tracing them off onto your card block. Now, at this point she says square down from 7. So 7 is there, our point. On mine it's right next to a spot and cross, but it's not on one. So we square down. That's important. It's a long squaring. So you want to be careful with it. Once you have a long squared line, it can easily go out. So look at how close it is in relation to your spots and crosses, and be sure by the time you get down lower that it's not further away or closer. Then you'll know, okay, I've kept my line consistent. So this is why our spot and cross paper can be so helpful when we're doing the blocks. We can see if we're staying consistently near that. Okay? I think I veered away a little bit more there. So what I'm saying there is check that your line, I can see how close it is to the X there, similar there, it's similar there, that down here it's not getting further away. I think mine might be slightly, but anyway. So then She says 7 to 13, so we're going right down to the bottom now, is the sleeve length to the wrist, and then we square across both ways for wrist line. So that's our wrist line. We're going to square down the measurement, the only other measurement we're given, the sleeve length, which is 58.5. I'm going to measure down and square across. 58.5. Square down, oh sorry, measure, then square across. Okay, that's our wrist line. And then she says square down from 11 and 12 to the wrist line and mark points 14 and 15. So that's 11 and 12. So that's kind of our the base of the bottom of our sleeve block done. And remember, we're not going to do the bit where she takes it in or the curve at the bottom. We're going to just leave it like this. So once we've squared down here and here, that's all we need to do. So this one of mine happens to be on a spot and cross, pretty much the side of one, so that's really handy. I can use that to square with. And again, they're long lines, so just take your time with the squaring. And when you're extending, be sure that you put a large section of your set square on the line that you're using and extend a little bit, Don't do this sort of thing where you put only a small bit and then extend a long bit. Put a long bit on the line and extend a little bit, and it will be more accurate. Okay, so there you go. That's all you need to do there. As you can see on the diagram, I have wiggled through the curvy line and the lines that narrow it, and I've said that do not do the curve at the wrist or the inner lines. Okay, so that brings us, does it to the curve? Yeah, the sleeve head it's called. So this is the other bit that is good just to see how I do it. And there's just a few sets of instructions. So we're coming from 12 to 9, which is here. And she says hollow the curve 0.7 centimeters. So what that means is you're coming down in this curve inside here. It's 0.75, is it? Yeah. So it doesn't really say, but what you want to do is find the middle or the rough middle. So that's nearly 10 and I'm coming, So you can either eyeball it or measure it if you want. Just somewhere around the center, you're going to come out 0.75. So what I do is I put all the marks in for where, and then I do the curve all at once. Okay, because I don't want to just do this bit and then I come to here and I realize I should have slightly changed that curve. So the next one, raise the curve from 9 to 7. Raise the curve 1 centimeter. So 9 to 7, we're going to find the center. We're going to raise that one. We're going to put a little mark there. The next one is a little more complicated because it's 7 to 5 here. Raise the curve 2 centimeters at 1/3 of the distance. So we're coming out 2, but we're coming out 1/3 here. So this part needs to be more rounded. We don't want a pointy sleeve. It won't look good. So this bit is fuller here at the top. So we need to measure our line and find 1/3 of that. And then come up 2 centimeters. So you can measure, and if you're trying to find 1/3, you divide by 3. Okay? Anyway, so I'm going to come there, and then I'm coming out, squaring out, and I'm measuring 2 on that. Okay, so I have my line there. And then for 5 to 11, we hollow out the curve 1 centimeter. So this is quite big and then quite deep here. And that's for the front of the body. Remember our, you know, our shoulder joint here comes out and it's more forward and it comes this way. So we're allowing more space for that, and then it's deeper here. Whereas the back is a little flatter, isn't it? The back is flatter. So they are different on each side because our bodies are different on each side. So again, you can measure and find the center, or you can, it's probably best to measure, as we don't know if our eyeballs are trained well enough yet. Okay, so once I have that, I have all my marks in there, and then I'm going to try and draw the smoothest of curves that I can. You might need to sketch a little bit. You're practicing your curves, so you can sketch. If you're sketching, sketch lightly, and then try and get one clear line over it, maybe erase the sketchy bits. And you know, if you want to use the curved implements to help you, they can work. Sometimes they make it almost too curvy though. You know, so there's a bit of skill involved in using those French curves or any of those curved rulers. So whatever you're liking to use, you know, start getting used to it. All I know is that this position needs to be quite flat, so I tend to start with this. It's very important that that's flat and not pointy. So I tend to start there and, you know, pull my curve into that point. Then I'm looking here and I'm going, okay, it needs to come through there and then go to that. So I'm trying to imagine, sometimes you could do that a little bit. Draw with your finger or with your eye a little bit, and come down. And down to there. Okay. So you do your best to kind of make a nice curved shape there. And then from here, it's a little easier because it's bigger. But then here you're coming in quite steep and then down into a deeper curve. So again, just maybe, you know, sketch it in lightly if you need to, and then now. Okay, so that is what your curve looks like. And that is the sleeve block finished. Yeah. So you can mark this your elbow line.
For point 10, did you just find a point that the curve met the line?
Point 10 relates to point 32 on our block. So when I did the first tracing, the initial tracing of this arm side, I actually marked that in just out of instinct because I knew I'd need it.
Okay.
So if you hadn't marked that in, you just place your paper back over this line of the arm side and get that position. So the last thing I want to show you, which is really important, is how to get your notches back onto your body block. So here's our sleeve block, and our balance points are marked. So we call them the balance point or the armhole notches. There's one more term for it, isn't there? Anyway, so our balance points are our notches. I tend to use the term notch, so that's our front armhole notch or our front sleeve notch, you know? So it needs to go on here. So this bit here sews to this bit sews to this, you know, and then this sews to that. So our notch is really vital in this because between this notch and this notch, there is more ease in here. And we need to know that we're only sewing the more ease between the notch points here and here on the body. We don't want the more ease down here. We'd be doing the wrong shape. So the notches on the sleeve or armhole notches are really very important. They're the most important notches of the ear. okay? And it's the very last thing we're doing on the block. So you have to take this block, this sleeve block, and place it back on top, you know? So I think that everyone should just watch this, so even whatever you're doing now, just put your eyes up here for a sec. I'm taking my sleeve block, I'm putting it back in the original position that I had it, with this lining up, number 1 lining up to position 22, yeah? Okay, and I can see my arm side is lined up and everything's lined up. Now, I'm going to take my tracing wheel. I have one handy. So I'm going to take my tracing wheel and I'm going to trace through this point. That notch that I have at 5 to 5A, and I'm going to trace through this point, which is 4. Okay, now I don't want to do it too hard on the blackboard and make marks, but when I trace through there and there, I'm going to.
That's 31 and 16. The
No.
ones you crossed out, is it?
Yes, they're the ones I crossed out because you can see, I can see here, the notch that I made is actually here, you see? And the other one is here, I've traced it through, so I'm tracing my little trace off. So this here, I might outline it in red, and this here, these are our very important notches.
But they're lower than 16 and 31.
Okay, so can you see how confusing that is? Like naturally, if you just looked, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's a point here and there's a point here, and look at how similar they are. But they're not the points. 31 and 16 are just not the balance point. Okay, so there are very important notches. So they are here and here, so they match this notch here on the sleeve, so you don't have to do anything with the sleeve. The sleeve just has those points and it will be there, the notch. But on the bodice, you need to kind of ignore those, like you can do what I've done, cross through them or something, and then highlight these. Now the thing with this, there's a single notch there and there. They mark the position exactly. For helping out when you're a beginner, differentiate between a back and a front, particularly on fabric, because on the patterns we can write back everywhere, and we might even have a big B here and a big F, and that's all grand. But on fabric we don't have that, and fabric moves all around, and when we pick it up, this might look very similar to that, and we might be abstracted. There might be only a little panel that's that big, we won't even know whether it's a front or back or what it is. So a double notch goes on the back. I created double notch, so 2 notches. And so then you'll always know that's a back and a single notch is a front.
So the notches on the sleeve, they're at 5A and 5 and 4. Are they the positions?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, the sleeve notches are at 5 and at 9, and they match
5
this
and 9.
position here.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So my method is always the bottom notch is the actual correct notch, and I measure up 0.5 and create a second notch. That's only just for marking that it's a back. So just so if for whatever reason you're trying to measure from the notch point and you come and it's a double notch, the lower one will always be the one you measure from. Doesn't come up that often. The odd time it comes up. So that's that. So there's your double notch, and you can see it over there on the card block. See the way it has double and then a single. And then see the way on the sleeve it's the same. So on the sleeve I do the same. I come up 0.5 here and I make a second notch. And that then is our double notch and a single notch. So that completes the one-piece sleeve block. What you want to do is label this on your blocks. You always have your size, so put your name. Then you can just write sleeve block. That's fine with me, particularly for this assignment. If you had loads of blocks in a studio or something, you'd need to write what it was relating to, like close fitting bodice block, women's wear, whatever. But for this assignment, if you just want to write sleeve block, that is fine. But just write size 12. Okay, so, and then be sure and mark a B and an F. Okay, so then, write your name. I'm going to put SCFE Sleeve Block, size 12. Okay, so block that in, keep all that information in one spot, not like over in different places, and then you're back in front. There is no center front or center back line here, because remember, that's only relates to the center front and back of the body. Sometimes people want to name that, but that's not. That's right there along the sleeve. It is the grain line though. It's the grain line that we'll use, but it is not a center front or back. So, yep, that completes the sleeve block demonstration for Winifred Aldrich. Anything else I need to say? No, but just in terms of when you're doing the card, you can see all this stuff. There's a load of stuff here that you don't trace. You just trace the curved line and then the kind of rectangle.
When are you going to post the video?
I'm not sure.